is filled with sorrow. Things happen. All you have to do is stack up a few years on this planet and things will have happened to you. Your body suffers pain and limitation. Your children are in danger of addiction and accident. Jobs are terrible or they're lost. War sweeps through and people lose their lives or homes or they lose their humanity. Arms dealers stir up unrest so they'll have a ready market for their weapons. Dictators strip their nations of treasure and dignity, pitting people against one another, with truth and fairness being the first casualties. I was down at St. David's in the trauma ICU yesterday. One of our members was in a car wreck. A car rolled. So when I came into the room, she looked at me out of two black eyes. She said, "Why do bad things happen?" And then she smiled. She knew I was talking about it today. I was like, "You're in pain and you're on drugs and you're still a smart aleck." That's my girl. She did nothing to deserve that. We always want to know, well, exactly what happened. And in that way, we can make resolutions not to have it happen to us. But sometimes it's nothing you did. Sometimes it's something someone else did. Sometimes it's weather. Sometimes it's machinery. The why do bad things happen is a question people have been struggling with for 20,000 years. How do we know this? Because in archaeological digs in the Indus Valley, we found ancient Hindu manuscripts that deal with this question. In Hinduism, from the little I know about it, Shiva is both the creator and destroyer. Shiva dances the dance of creation and destruction. Kali Ma, she creates by destroying. So there are demons, but they hurt or devour at the instruction of the gods. A lot of times destruction is part of creation. I mean, any gardener knows that. You have to take out the old and put in the new. So I think about Hinduism when I'm considering what I want to believe. And I think when I read people on Facebook going, "I just can't help but believe in God when I saw the beautiful dolphins at sunset," I think, yeah, but if God is in nature, if God is in everything, then God is in the cancer cell and the plague virus. It's hard to go there. Buddhism grew out of Hinduism, and so they have the same concept of karma that Hindus have. You are suffering in this life because you're paying for something you did in the last life, or good things are happening to you in this life because of things you did that were good in the last life. And of course, there are an infinite number of beliefs within each religion, so I'm painting with a very broad brush. But Buddhism says there is karma, there is suffering, mostly because you have a craving or a desire. And so if you're craving bodily health, if you're craving the health of your children, if you're craving a long life or enough money, if you're craving not to be hungry, then it's that craving that you need to work on rather than satisfying all your desires. And you're suffering because you're craving. And if you can not crave, you could let go of health or wealth with peace in your heart. And the other thing that Buddhism teaches is that this is all an illusion. But I can't stand in somebody's hospital room and say, this is an illusion. That does not work. The oldest book in the Hebrew scriptures is the book of Job, which is dealing with this exact problem. And so God and Satan at the beginning of the book are looking down on this man, Job, and his family, and God says, look at my servant Job, he loves me, he praises me. And Satan, I'm making a long story short, says, yeah, just because he's doing well. If he were hurting, he wouldn't be praising you. And God said, oh yeah? Let's try it. And so Satan attacks Job. All his children die, his crops die, his animals die, his body gets sick. And he's sitting just on top of a trash heap. And he's shaking his fist at God. And he's saying, God, I did not deserve this. I didn't do anything to deserve this. I need to talk to you about why this is happening to me. And his friends gather around. And his friends say everything that you could hear at almost any church in the country. His friends say, oh, Job, don't be questioning God now. That's not a good idea. God's going to get even madder at you. Don't question. And Job says, I have a right to question. I'm a good person. I don't deserve this. I want an answer from God. And then they go, I think your children probably were sinful. Your children were doing sinful things, and they removed the hedge of protection around your family. And so these bad things are happening. And Job's like, no, they were fine. They were fine. I need to talk to God. And they say all the other things. They don't say, I want you to consider why you attracted this suffering into your life. They didn't think of that mean thing to say. They kind of said, well, Job, it's just God's will. Everything happens for a reason, which is also kind of a mean thing to say, although it comforts some people. And finally, God does come down. And God says to the friends, y'all are wrong and ridiculous, and you should scurry away. And he says to Job, I don't owe you anything. And yet he kind of maybe felt like he did because he came to talk to him. He said, do you know where the storehouses of the snow are? Are you a friend of the water-spurting whale? In other words, you're not God and you don't know anything. But Job stays faithful in that he doesn't ever turn away from God. He keeps yelling at God, which in the Hebrew scriptures is a faithful response. And then in the end of the book, God gets everything, Job gets everything back. He gets new children and new crops, and I'm thinking, new children, I would, might be missing my old children. Carl Jung wrote that he thought God felt bad about that for eons, and that God sending Jesus to die on the cross was God's answer to Job. That's what he called it in his article, Answer to Job. He said God was saying to Job, look, I'm suffering too now. Nobody knows. So is God responsible for evil? Did God create evil? Does he allow evil? And many, many people of the book, the religions of the book, which are Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and again, I'm painting with a broad brush, they would say evil is a result of the fall. God wills things, and we accept the will of God. And so you'll hear people in churchianity churches and in mosques say, well, God willed it. God willed it. And so you have to accept it and not question. But that's what the friends of Job said, that God shook his fist at, his or her fist at. And so does God allow evil, or is God fighting evil? Don't know. Don't know. Most people will look at two things when they're explaining bad things that happen. And the first thing is free will. So apparently the belief in many religions is that human beings are created with free will. And you make your choices. And some people just choose badly, and so they suffer, and they marry the wrong person, or they get addicted to something, or they, I don't know. I'm not going to name all the bad choices. You know what they are. And sometimes we suffer because of other people's free will. You know, this developer chose to build houses on a floodplain, so the people get flooded out, and that's a bad thing that happened to them, but it was because the developer, was allowed to build in the wrong place. Or people strip the mountains of trees, and so in Bangladesh, the water just flows down and floods the people out because the trees used to take care of that, but they can't anymore. Or the camper didn't put out the campfire, and so we have a forest fire. That's a bad thing that's caused by a mistake from somebody who was exercising their free will. And then there's natural law, which is the other thing that explains evil, because things have properties. The physical world has properties, and if I need a hammer to hammer a nail in, I need the hammer to be hard. But if I'm going to use a hammer on another person, the hammer, it's not going to suddenly get soft just because I'm using my free will to use the hammer in a bad way. Natural law, things just are what they are, and they normally stay the way they are, and things that don't stay the way they are a cause for scientific exploration. And so, you want a car to be sturdy and hard and heavy if you're loading your whole family up into it and all your stuff going on a road trip. But if you hit somebody on a bicycle, it's not going to suddenly get soft just because you didn't see someone or you were not paying attention. And so most of the bad things can be explained by a combination of free will and natural law. This is why this happened. But you can't also stand in somebody's hospital room and say, when she says, why do bad things happen? You can't say, well, this happened to you because of physics. It's true, but it's not pastoral. And nature is heartless. It makes lots of organisms that are not viable. We just hope they're not ourselves or our children. It doesn't care if you're a small warm thing and you're out in freezing temperatures with no protection. You're going to die, and the moon is still going to shine beautifully. The sun is still going to set in a gorgeous way, and the dolphins are still going to. the end of a play called J.B., which is about Job, Archibald MacLeish has Job's wife say, "If God is God, he is not good. And if God is good, he is not God." That puts this problem in a nutshell for people who believe in a personal God who has a will. Other people, they might believe in a force of evil as part of the spirit world or as part of the natural world. That, Dylan Thomas said, "The force that through the green fuse drives the flowers, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer, and I am dumb to tell the crooked rose. My youth is bent by that same wintry fever." So there's just an energy of life, and the energy of life and time causes the flowering and then the withering. So is what we call evil just a force in nature, or is there a personal devil? That makes so much good drama, and it makes a good narrative for your life if you can say, I grew up in a church where sometimes if a bad thing happened to you, people would say, "Well, this is a lesson God is teaching you, testing your faith." And sometimes they would say, "Well, the devil is attacking you." I'm like, which is it? How do you tell? And sometimes people would say, "Well, the devil just got in me and I did it." Convenient. So sometimes it's a force that we are supposed to resist. And some people feel like they need to just accept it. And sometimes we wonder, is that force stronger in some people than in others? We know it's in all of us. We know that the line between good and evil runs down the middle of every person, but sometimes it doesn't seem like there's that much good in some people. And you wonder, the Humanist Manifesto of 1933 would say, it's because of upbringing, it's because of circumstances of life and raising, One of my dearest friends is a vet, and she says some mammals are just born bad. She's talking about dogs that she sees. Some dogs are just bad dogs. And she said some people are just bad dogs. I don't know if that's true, but I've had enough conversation with people who grew up with psychopaths that they have had experience with someone who is just unable to have empathy. And in the January National Geographic, there was an article about empathy and how some people are wired for it. Some people have overmuch empathy, and other people have a middle amount, and other people have very little. They can't really feel the feelings that people around them have. They say, and I don't know if this is true, but in the book, The Psychopath Next Door, or I think that's the name of it, they say 1 in 25 people is like this, just not wired for having feelings. And so if you're one of those people, you watch other people and see how they do it. Like, oh, that's what happy looks like. Or that's what concern looks like. Or it's like they're performing their emotions rather than feeling them. And it's kind of scary. Not all of them are bad or do bad things, but some of them are very, very detached. So, I'm not going to have an answer after 20,000 years, sorry, but I've given you some of the things that people say, and the woman in the hospital, I asked her what she thought, and she said, "I think the bad helps us appreciate the good." So that's one answer. I think when bad things happen, we're called to keep our kindness toward the people the bad things are happening to, and our own kindness when the bad things happen to us. No matter what pain and panic we're feeling, it's hard to stay kind, but it's a good spiritual exercise. And not to say cruel things. like, well, everything happens for a reason. Try saying that to somebody who's hurt in the hospital. We're just supposed to stand or roll up or run up or get on the side of love. That's what we're supposed to do, just be on the side of love in any situation. Lend our strength and our comfort and our experience, but not our advice, unless it's asked for, to people who are suffering. Mostly just listen and love.